Hi, second graders. I am so excited for another week learning and reading with you. So this week we'll be focusing on nonfiction texts again, but we're going to be looking more at asking and answering questions. So give me a second while I switch my screen and then we'll get started. All right, so like I said, our focus is to ask and answer questions using a nonfiction text because questioning leads to deeper understanding. When you're asking yourself questions and answering them while you read, you're going to be better understanding the text that you're reading. You're going to get more information from the text. So, our learning target is I can ask and answer questions using a nonfiction text to understand what I've read. Now, here are the question words. This is your starting point. You're going to be asking yourself who, what, when, where, why, and how. You've seen these question stems many times, and if you need a good reminder of them, I've included a vocabulary brain break that you can do after watching this video, or you can pause and look at it on the assignment page. So, good readers ask questions before reading, during reading, and after reading. Now we're going to start with some before reading questions. You start asking questions when you first look at the title and the cover of the book you're about to read. You can start to ask yourself questions. So I want you to take a minute and look at the title, Plant Life Cycles, and look at the photographs that the author has included and start thinking of some questions that you have. All right, so here are the questions I asked myself before reading. What is a plant? How do plants begin? And how many steps are in a plant life cycle? So I know a little bit about plants and life cycles before reading this, so I'm using my background knowledge to ask these questions because we learned in our book a few weeks ago about caterpillars and how they have life cycles. So there were steps in those. So this is kind of looking at plants, and I'm kind of wondering, how do plants begin? So how does the life cycle start? And then how many steps, and what are those steps in a plant life cycle? And then I might want to better understand what is a plant. So I'm hoping this book might give me a little bit better understanding of that. So I've got those questions in mind as I start to read the book. And then while we're reading, we want to try to answer the questions that we have. I may also form new questions. You'll see me model asking and answering questions while we read the text as well. Also, a good point to start is using the headings to preview the text, and you can form questions to answer while you're reading. Because remember, the headings give us kind of the main idea of that section, and you can kind of preview the text and ask questions based on that heading. So today we will read pages 4 through 11 in Plant Life Cycles. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our book. And we're going to be keeping in mind text features as well because we're reading a nonfiction text. So we're going to be using the stuff that we've worked on the past couple weeks, as well as adding in this new element of asking and answering questions. So I start by previewing the text, looking at the text features. So I notice there's a heading. It says Packet of Life. So that's interesting, packet. So I'm wondering what that means. I'm seeing there's a photograph that looks like seeds to me. And then here it looks like there's some dirt. A person is putting in seeds into the ground. And then, have you ever planted seeds? So this is just a question that kind of is activating your background knowledge that the author has asked you. So that's showing the importance of asking and answering questions while you read as well. We also have some bold words, reproduce and life cycle. So there's a glossary in the back of this book, but to make it easier, I've pulled up a glossary in my slides. So we can look at that now to better help us. So our two words were reproduce, which means to make more plants, often by way of seeds. And our other one was life cycle. So remember, a life cycle is the never-ending process by which animals and plants begin, reproduce, and die. So we've got those words. So if at any point we need to come back to the glossary for some bold words, we can do that. All right. So let's go ahead and read this page. So packet of life. Every living thing begins. Let me start over. I apologize. Sometimes when something doesn't sound right when you're reading, you have to go back to the beginning and reread it so it makes sense. That's what good readers do. So every living thing begins, can reproduce, and dies. That makes more sense now. And many plants, this life cycle begins with a seed. That makes sense. We have those pictures. All right, here's our next page. Looking around, I'm noticing these photographs seem to be going in order. We've got some labels, and then we have a caption here to pay attention to. A seed holds the beginnings of a plant's first roots, stem, and leaves. Now I'm going to go ahead and read the captions and look at the photographs to better understand this page. A seed ready to grow. Roots begin to grow. Roots grow bigger. These are the roots right here. I can tell that based on this caption and looking at the photo. Now a stem begins to grow. So comparing these two photos, this part looks new. So this is going to be the stem. Then we have here, we have the stem, and then we have leaves. We can see this life cycle process as the seed grows. Some plants begin from a bulb. Bulbs grow roots, stems, and leaves too. An onion plant begins from a bulb. So I'm not going to look at the glossary here, even though it's a bold word. I'm going to use some context clues. And I might ask myself, what is a bulb? That's a new word, but I can use what the page is giving me. So right here, this picture, we see onion plant begins from a bulb. So we see a plant coming out of something that looks just like this. I'm going to say this is a bulb. And this seems to be very similar to a seed. It just looks much bigger. But it still grows roots, stems, and leaves like seeds do that we learned on the last page. Life unfolding. The tiny plant grows. Roots make a strong base. They take in water and nutrients from the soil. So here's another bold word, nutrient. So if I look back at my glossary, I can find out that nutrients means minerals and other chemicals in the soil that are needed by plants to stay healthy and grow. So we've heard the word nutrients when we talk about ourselves too. We need certain nutrients in our food that help keep us healthy. So the plants need that too. And they get that from the soil. And then we have a picture here identifying the roots as they grow. So this is where we're going to stop today because we've read a lot, we've learned a lot. We've also started to answer some of our questions. So I'm going to return to the presentation. So there's our glossary, which we can refer to in the back of the book. So after I read, this is an important step. So answer any questions that you had before getting started. So those are my before reading questions, the list I had at the beginning. And then respond to questions about what you've read to show understanding. Sometimes after reading a book or a passage, you'll be asked to answer some questions to show that you understood what the book was about, to comprehend what was going on. So this was one of my questions from the beginning. What is a plant? When I read the book, there wasn't a part that particularly defined the word plant, but I can use my inferencing skills into that plants are living, and then an example is a flower like I saw on the cover, and like some of the examples that were shown in the book. The other question I have is, how do plants begin? I want you to think about that, what we've read, and come up with your own answer before I show you what I found in the text. If you said seeds and bulbs, you were right. And I found those answers on page 4 and page 8 when I went back in the text. So how do they begin? So like page 4 here, in many plants, this life cycle begins with a seed. So I have my answer right there. And then later on, when we kept reading, remember, we were introduced to the word bulb, and it said some plants begin from a bulb. So I was able to answer the question that I had using the book. All right, and I had one more question. How many steps are in a plant life cycle? So using the diagram on page 6 and 7, there seems to be 4 steps. It wasn't completely defined and clear, so I want to keep thinking about this question as I finish the book, because I know I haven't finished the book yet. But looking at page 6 and 7, so when we go back, it shows 1, 2, 3, 4 steps as it starts to go. So the seed, as it begins to grow, the roots getting bigger, the stem starting to grow, and then the stem and leaves together, making it about 4 steps that it starts to show. So we'll keep reading about it to see if that is true, or I'm wondering if it depends on what type of plant it is, because we're not quite sure what plant, and I'm wondering if the life cycle steps is different for a plant that begins from a bulb. So I've got some new questions now. So once you start reading, you start to ask new questions. And you'll try to find new answers by continuing reading the text. So we'll continue the book tomorrow. And what you're going to do today to for you to practice asking and answering questions is, here's your reading response. So I want you to reread through pages 4 through 11. And I want you to keep in mind your own questions you may have and try to answer them. Then you want to complete the response questions on the next few slides to show your understanding. Then I've also included an optional iReady activity that I would recommend doing today, since today was a bit of a shorter lesson. So if you click on the link, it will take you to an activity where you have to read about the upside down tree, and then you answer some questions on that text. So step 2 is to complete the response questions on the next slide to show your understanding of what we've read so far in plant life cycles. So when I go to those slides, here are the questions. Use the pictures and caption on page 6 and 7. What 3 things grow from a seed? So you want to list them either here in a slide, or you can do this on your own scratch paper. Question 2, draw a picture of roots. What is one purpose of roots? So go back in the text and find where they talked about roots to answer this question. And then create your own list of questions you have about plant life cycles to think about on day 2. So tomorrow when we finish reading the book, you want to come with those questions that you still have, and keep those in mind while we read the rest of the book. I hope you all enjoyed our lesson on plant life cycles and asking and answering questions while we read. Enjoy completing the reading response activities, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye, second graders.